This is for CEOs and other C-level executives. How do you get your product development teams to deliver value to stakeholders on time, under budget? That's the question that we're asking. You are going to meet a CEO next week in London, is that right?
That's right.
And what happened?
Well, we've encountered this CEO before, my friend Chris and I, about 5 years ago. And Chris was working at a lower level on the projects in the organization. And he showed me some of the requirements and stuff, and it was the usual bullshit. And long story short, I actually wrote down a list of what was going to go wrong with their very large projects. We're talking, I don't know, £5 million or something like that. And
why did you write that down?
Because when people have bullshit inputs about values, they inevitably cannot deliver the real values, so they fail. So I wrote down a list of about 5 things that would go wrong, like the projects would be late, they would cost too much, they wouldn't deliver much value. I dated it just for fun. I also suggested the CEO would probably lose his job. Okay. That was a long time ago. We forgot, but Chris got into contact with that same CEO recently, and the CEO was ready to listen to us for the first time. We never really reached the CEO before. We were layers of management were keeping us away from him, and he wasn't asking us.
Did you send this list to him?
I don't know what Chris did with it, but right now Chris and I actually reviewed this list, and everything happened as we predicted. Everything went wrong, except the CEO was still in power because he did a lot of other good things. He's really a good CEO. Okay, so he kept in power. And so my problem, Kai, and you can advise me a little bit on this, is what am I going to do on Monday, with the meeting? How do we really get this guy on board? I know the first lesson is whatever my preconceived notions, I walk in and I listen to what he has to say.
Do you show him the list?
We haven't done it yet, but that's probably going to come up. So
Why not? Why not show him the list and say, hey, I wrote this, I dated this, what happened?
Okay, so maybe we'll do that. Probably, we probably only have an hour, and we can't just barge in with our agenda. We have to really listen to what he wants and deal with what he wants. But let's say we're ready to do that. And he's already been briefed to a certain degree about what, we knew his projects went very badly. We know why, and that's why he's listening to us this time around.
Just very approximate. What's the size of the projects this CEO
is
responsible for?
Okay, it's a fairly large company with thousands of employees in London. Yeah, and the investment in these projects, which were sort of digital transformation type of things, was at least £5 million from memory. It may have been more, and but almost nothing of note was delivered. Okay, there's basically a failure. Of course, they covered it up, made excuses and things like that. So maybe the board of directors isn't aware of how badly it went. I don't know. Anyway, he's ready to listen second time. We'll maybe in a future podcast say what happened, but it might take a few years. So okay, but we've started analyzing his objectives from that time, and they're all words, nice sounding words. There are a few numbers. They are numerate, but like 3 out of 10 goals has some numbers in it, and 7 out of 10 is just nice sounding words. So there is no hope that anybody can deliver or be held responsible for delivering anything in that case.
I think also what happens is even when there are numbers, they are not what is presented to the product development team and with a mission saying your job is to deliver these improvements. Right? They come in like a flock of other requirements with not very specific, responsibility to achieve these improved numbers. They're just there.
Nobody has assigned named responsibility for making up a goal. Nobody has responsibility for delivering it. It's just floating around in space. There are lots of them. And these goals are at all kinds of different levels, very detailed technical levels and corporate levels. They're also the usual mixture of ends and means. In other words, often the goal is to do a specific technical thing, which we hope will help achieve this and that, which we hope will achieve this and that. None of it's defined.
Exactly, because that's those words, which we hope will achieve, is usually the attitude. So even when numbers are there, they're not like you're responsible to create this. They are, when we do these, the means, the technology, we hope that we'll get these great benefits. And there's just some kind of loose connection between that and the hope. So I think to be able to succeed, you need to turn this completely around and say, here are the numbers you have to achieve. That's your responsibility. Maybe these are some technologies you can use. If they don't work, switch them out. But no matter how you do it, reach these numbers.
Another thing is the idea of forcing people to get some good value delivery results early and frequently, not putting it off. And when we say early, we mean like on the second week of the project and the other 51 weeks of the year. And
for big projects, right? So this is quite easy to envision if you're creating a website or something, you get something up and running. But we're not talking about that here. We're talking about large, for thousands of people, including hundreds of people. I mean, large projects.
So now to do that, you're going to have to decompose, that's a key word, some big ideas, big technologies, to get down to the level of maybe just one department or one small group of people in the corporation for which you deliver a change next week. Okay, you got to, and most people don't seem to understand this idea of decomposition so that you can deliver values early and in short term.
Okay, now let's focus more on the CEO. We'll go there too. But before we go there, this is a ValueFirst podcast with Tom Gilb and me, Kai Gilb, and where we talk about all kinds of subjects for how to succeed in product development. So now I think a lot of C-level executives are a little afraid of the unknowns in technology. I think they don't understand that they need to actually demand values delivered to stakeholders, and they leave too much up to the technical people because they don't understand the technology completely.
Okay. So C-level executives don't have to understand the technology. They can ignore it and forget it if they focus on the values they need for their company. Okay, that's the value quantification and clarification is the interface between the executive and the technical teams bringing about change. So your attitude should be, I don't care how you do it technically, but I want to see the numeric value increases. And if you can't do that, I've got to find somebody who can do it. Okay, and it's not a matter of after 5 years and £5 million, something will pop up. I want to see it in the short term. I want you to figure out what Gilb means about decompose so you can get some real stuff that convinces me that we're making real change. That, by the way, I can report up to the board or my boss and say, here is real change we're really making. It's measurable, it's happening in real parts of the company, and we will extend upon it cumulatively as we go along. And one of the other reasons for delivering early quantified results is to get feedback when you're not getting as good a result as you think you want, and learn from that right away. Why aren't we, even in a small, simple situation, getting the results we need? What do we got to change? And you try to change that and see if it works better. So that's an agile learning posture. But you've got to, as a C-level decision maker, you've got to insist on following things. We have to have quantified value ideas for which somebody is responsible for having asked for, like you, and somebody is responsible for trying to deliver. Okay, that's our platform. That's our interface with the whole rest of the project and the company. Second thing we have to have is this idea of delivering early and frequently. Next week and every week, something real should happen so we can prove that we know how to deliver results in practice in real places in our corporation. And we can learn when we're doing it not so well that we need to improve something right away in our whole process of dealing with the change there.
Let's take this a little bit step by step. So the first thing is you don't need to understand the technology, and I would even take it further. You should not suggest specific technology, and
you should not accept the pressures of salesmen of various things that to do a certain technology. Say, I don't care about that technology. I only care about the value. You show me the value, I'll buy into your technology for getting there.
Exactly. So, but I see this go wrong all the time. So you go into a project, and the project, like you said with this guy in London, was to digitize something.
Digital transformation.
Okay, already what we're talking about is solution. They've done they mixed up the ends and the means. The digitizing is a means to an end. The C-level executives need to focus on what ends, what outcomes are we going to achieve. What values are we going to improve for our various stakeholders? Maybe we digitize. Maybe not. Maybe we do it in one way, maybe in a different way. That's the means. That's secondary. That's up to the technology guys to come up with. So the moment you as a C-level executive start suggesting how you are doing the architecture, you're doing the technical design to achieve the means, and you will limit your people to actually achieve great results. You limit them. Of course, that's not what you want. Another example that I see a lot when we work with big banks is that a lot of banks, they acquire each other. And they very quickly end up with 2 or 3 different products that more or less does the same thing. It does the same function. So they, let's say you have 3 products, and they all calculate interest rates, and they all, you can do some kind of trades, or they all. So very quickly, when we get involved, there are projects saying, hey, out of these projects, combine them and make one product that does the same as the 3, and eliminate the duplicity of them. Already, that is a design decision. That's an architectural decision taken way too early, that will have consequences, that will not enable your team to really think creatively and come up with the very best solution to create the results that you want. You are thinking of some results, like 2-3 systems doing the same thing is probably very costly, right? It's like, you have to maintain,
but
and
you can get some
teach.
scary costs when you try to combine systems.
Exactly. So what you should do is you should take a look at, for instance, the costs of running these 3 systems and saying, okay, your job is to create systems, plural or not, doesn't really matter, that does what it needs to do so and so well with much reduced cost, right? So the job should be to reduce the cost by 2/3, for instance. Why not? So reduce various costs, maintenance costs, training costs, whatever the costs are, reduce it by 2/3. That's how a C-level executive gives out their requirements, their objectives, their needs, not by saying anything about how. And this, I think, is so critical. The moment they say how, the projects becomes that solution. So everybody will start, okay, let's make one system. And more often than not, people end up with the new system that has its cost. and maybe it's even higher than any of the 3 previous ones. Plus, they can't really shut down the 3 other ones because they need them for various reasons. So they end up with all the costs of the 3 previous systems and a new cost of the 4th system that they all have to run and maintain. And we see this again and again. It's kind of ridiculous. It's really hard to turn off the old systems, especially when you haven't engineered it and designed it in, from the very beginning, which you would be forced to do if your job was to reduce the cost for the whole.
So the subject of decomposition is interesting. It turns out that people feel, well, I can't deliver anything next week or the week after. I've got to spend a year or 2 building something, and then the miracle will happen. And what we found is some people, when you say decompose it into small weekly increments, they can just do it. But half of the same group of professional people, they will deny it can be done, and they don't know how, and they've not been trained. So we found that, for example, we operate with about 20 different principles for how to decompose. But you can decompose by value and by costs, and you can decompose by technical solutions. There we have all kinds of methods for decomposing.
Be a little careful here.
Yeah.
So, not to be misunderstood, you can decompose by technical solutions, but this is where most people go wrong, that do decompose. The people that do decompose, they're thinking of the technical solution being decomposed and delivered in steps. That's not what we mean. You can decompose in technical solutions, but what you're really decomposing is the value through technical. That's what you mean, right? So what we don't recommend is that you decompose into technical solutions without each delivery actually producing value. So you might risk lots of decomposition of technical, and you build more and more and more, and you lost track of your ability to deliver the improvements that the C-level executives are interested in, right? But decomposition is a fairly complex subject and not appropriate for a podcast. I'd say the point is there are systematic methods of decomposition that we teach and we use that allow you to get next week with a value delivery and the week after with a value delivery. And your own people will deny this is possible, and they'll try to explain that it's not possible, but we found that it is always possible. That may sound incredible until it's proven by really doing it. Okay. The other thing in addition to decomposition that comes in as a notion is prioritization. Okay, when you divide things up, you need to pick the thing you can do next week that has the highest set of values, bang, for the lowest costs, the buck. So bang for the buck, and you need to decide and tell people. I want you to decompose so you can do it in small increments, but I want you to deliver the increment that has the highest set of values for the lowest cost. That means somebody has to estimate what those values will be and what those costs will be in order to decide what the smartest thing to do is next week and every week thereafter. So if I'm a C-level executive, I'm the CEO, for instance, I don't do this. Right? So how do I get my people to do this is the question. And one such means for achieving that is having it in a policy that says, hey, development teams, you can do whatever you like with technology, etc., but you have to decompose what you're doing into value deliveries of weekly increments, for instance. So you leave them with the freedom to do it however they like, but what you are expecting to see is real value delivered to actual stakeholders on a frequent basis in a policy for how they run projects. And that's the C-level executive's job. If you don't do that, the product development team will not
They will procrastinate, make excuses for why they have to spend weeks and months with no value delivery to you. Okay, so you have to say, look, you either do it or we'll train you to do it, or we'll find somebody who can do it. But I want that value delivery every week. You have to stand firm on that. We found that is always possible and actually quite simple if you know how. Okay, but so the C-level executive has to drive it, has to make it happen. I want measurable values next week and every week so that we are seen to be doing the right thing to our managers, and so that we can learn what works and what doesn't work very rapidly. And one way of getting that knowledge is we've put it in writing and videos, okay? Will certainly help you, and hopefully there are other people who can help you find out how do we decompose so we can deliver value. But you've got to know it can be done if you know how, and it's not that difficult.
Mr. Hewlett and Mr. Packard, was it both of them?
Yeah.
They, being CEOs of a huge company with lots of responsibility, they made the 10X, what do you call it? It's not a policy, but a mission, right? Yeah. They had like a 10X mission that basically said nothing about how, nothing about technology, but they said that everybody working on whatever technology you are working on, you have to become 10 times better
in qualities, primarily of products and services, right?
Over 10 years.
Yeah.
And they hammered that in over 10 years, saying, okay, how much better are you than last year, and et cetera, et cetera.
And we worked with their corporate bodies on this, feeding them ideas for how to do it, and they accepted them. And at the end of 10 years, they didn't achieve 10 times. It was something like they published 9.95 times better. They just made it, but they really did it. But so here's a great example of a C-level executive driving a value. We, in order to compete with foreign competitors, we have to be 10 times better. And they didn't say it's a quarter of a year. They realized this is major change of processes and methods and everything like that. So they gave it 10 years. Actually, IBM in the same time period decided to copy Hewlett Packard and had like a 2 or 3 year time frame, and they failed. They were trying to do too much too fast. But Mr. Hewlett and Mr. Packard were mature enough to know that they were talking about a major change over the long term. They gave people the long term, and they then succeeded.
I think is important for C-level executives that are involved, in companies that does product development, especially high tech, to understand that product development is not a set of tasks that you need to organize and schedule. It just isn't. It's there's so much unknown, so much they have to explore and find their way towards, and this is key, towards delivering value to stakeholders, right? So if it's treated as a set of tasks, and then people will do the tasks, which will then be means oriented, it'll be solution oriented. Do this solution, that, create this, and at this level, the C-level executives have no control over what's happening. They lost control because it's just an endless, seems like progress. They're doing tasks. They're developing new stuff. It seems like progress, right? The people can report, and they've spent this much, and they've done all these tasks, and they develop all these things. Yet, that's not how product development of high tech works. You have to control it towards actually delivering value to stakeholders. It has to be that control. So again, if you are not 100% comfortable with the technology and you are listening too much to your technology people, they will very quickly turn everything into technology and solutions and tasks and apparent progress.
Right. So, and for example, if you use Agile and Scrum, you will do these wrong tasks 6 times with faster velocity. Okay, so we try to encourage our agile friends to start focusing on first do the right thing, then maybe do it faster. But right now they're doing wrong things like coding use cases for systems that probably the real solution is not to have an IT system at all, but they're writing more and more code and more use cases and faster. So shift the focus to the business results. You have to report upwards, which could be increased privacy, increased safety, increased cost effectiveness, something like that. Those are your primary values. Make sure they're quantified. No excuses. All of the values can be quantified, as we point out time and time again. And when you see these objectives that are all nice sounding words and no numbers, that's a danger sign. There's something wrong there. It's not going to work. You have to convert those into numeric, measurable ideas of value. That's your primary tool. If you haven't got that, we have got no other advice for you. You're doomed to fail, as we predicted for this CEO in London. Doomed to fail with the nice sounding value words.
Now, another trend, which is very strong, is that developers will come to the C-level executives and argue that their company should be more agile, right? So, and if you don't understand development and technology, you might be convinced that we should do all this agile training and whatnot. Now, there are many good things that come from the agile community. We're not saying it itself is wrong. I'm just saying that's a developer's point of view. It is not a view that a C-level executive needs to drive the project forward. Again, it's mixing the ends and the means. The agile is, by its very definition, a means. It's a possible way to be effective at creating value, right? So, it gets really ridiculous. A lot of people are discussing, how agile are we? We need to be more agile. My organization is more agile than your organization. It's like, yeah, but that's the means. Which one are better at delivering value to stakeholders within resources? So as a C-level executive, you need to drive your team in that direction strongly, right? Not little hints. You need to systematically, specifically drive your organizations to deliver maximum value to stakeholders as needed for the resources you give them.
The question is about agile. To what degree do I get better values faster if I do certain agile practices? If there's no clear correlation between those things, don't waste your time with those agile practices, because your focus is the value improvement, not the agility. Okay?
Yeah. Now, we, not even sure where I'm going with this, but remember Webvan?
Yeah.
So Tom and I, we were sitting in San Francisco with Mr. Borders. Mr. Borders was the founder of Borders bookstores. Some of you might remember. They were all over London, not so much in Europe, but they were in the big cities, but all over US. Borders bookstores was like huge chain. I think they were the first ones who started having like a coffee shop in the bookstore. It's more like a library, but it was actually a bookstore, right? So you come and it'd be like a hip thing to go to Borders, have your coffee latte, and you could take books, I think, from the store, from the shelves, and drink coffee and read them without buying them. And then, of course, they had lots of sales, so they did fantastic. Mr. Borders, he sold Borders, probably in good time. Amazon was knocking on their door and made a lot of money. And then he started Webvan. Webvan, if you look up, is known as one of the biggest. Every company was doing like internet things, and they didn't care about profit and value. They just wanted members and subscribers. And so then the bubble exploded, and people went bankrupt. and Webvan is sort of known as one of the biggest. So Tom and I, we were sitting with Mr. Borders, discussing his
And he liked our
business.
methods.
He liked them. He had funders. So basically, Webvan was the concept of ordering everything really from the web, and it will be delivered to your door, starting with groceries.
Yep.
And he had developed huge, very technically advanced and very cool, I would say, we were there having fun, warehouse in San Francisco with all kinds of automation. So it's not just like you type in your order on the website. That was the easy part. Then what happened was it went through a completely automated systems with thousands of products, picking automatically the different produce. And then, so that thing was very smooth. And then it had to be shipped to the customers there by the van. So it had to be driven out in all these vans to the customers. And he told us a little secret. And the secret was that for every order, they lost money because the final delivery was too expensive. Remember? And now the crazy thing was, he said, okay, and we have all this funding money for expanding. We're going to go to Atlanta, to New York, to I forget all the cities, but all the big cities. They were going to duplicate their San Francisco operation.
The losing proposition.
Which was already losing. So they were, I guess where I'm going with this is they were so stuck on the solution, that where they weren't focused enough about the value. So the solution was to create this warehouses and these van services to deliver these groceries without being enough focus on the values to create the values to make it profitable before they expanded. The ridiculous thing is this Mr. Borders, obviously extremely intelligent, probably more intelligent than us combined, somehow didn't listen to his own advice. I mean, we were there pointing it out to him, right? You cannot duplicate your efforts in other cities when what you have is not profitable. You have to tune it to make the values work first, right? What are the stakeholder values? And very easy one, make it profitable, right? Very easy, not easy to do, but easy to define and easy to understand, right? Very easy to understand value, make it profitable before you duplicate. Otherwise you're gonna go bankrupt very fast,
Which
no
is
matter how much
exactly
investor money. Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. But as the interesting point, though, he's very intelligent. Obviously, I mean, he created multi-million-dollar operations, first in Borders, and then at least in spending. The Webvan was, extremely large investments and
almost
operations.
like could have been what Amazon is today.
Yeah,
could have been.
Yeah, but so even with his knowledge, his intelligence, and even staring it in the eye, we pointed it out to him, and he actually knew it already. You have to make it profitable before you expand. You have to get the values right before you roll more with the solution. But he wasn't able to. The pressure of the investors is saying, if I do that, I will lose investor money. They are already invested. I already have the money. I have to do it. What do we do? What's the CEO to do?
Dr. W. Edward Zemming said that survival is not compulsory. So basically, have a good time. See you in the future sometime, maybe. Yeah.
I remember our main contact there that brought us in. He had stocks or stock options or whatnot in the company worth millions dollars, and he was just, well, it was not. It was a important manager of the technology there, and I remember, we were driving down one of these highways together, and we're talking about what should he do, and we were specifically telling him, sell your stocks. You remember that? We're saying you got to get out of this now. And sure enough, I forget, a few months, 3 months, 4 months after we left, big news, completely, the company went bust, completely bust.
Let me reformulate what we're talking about here. We're talking about taking small increments, but making sure they work. And if they don't work, you fix it before you take new increments. Okay.
Yeah.
And they just weren't listening. They had a large increment that wasn't working, and they took more increments that weren't working. And that's just, not a smart idea. Probably they were saying, well, we'll fix it soon, but we have to build these new factories in the meantime. Okay. Anyway.
So I think to sort of sum it up, if I were to give advice to
my CEO on Monday.
To your CEO on Monday.
Yeah.
Right? So then he needs to focus on defining the outcomes, the values of stakeholders.
Quantitatively, top 10 critical values. One page.
And then make sure that is what his teams are focused on. He needs to, keep them accountable to it, like an accountant,
Can I break in even though you're winding down?
Yeah, go.
So at International Computers Limited, with a great CEO we worked with called Rob Wilmot, when he got this idea, he went to his 12 directors, like director of mainframes and defense systems, and he said, you guys have been bullshitting me for years about what you're going to do all these great things. And I just realized you've been bullshitting me and getting money and power. You will, within 1 week, quantify the top 10 critical values you're going to deliver from your section of the corporation to me. And if you don't do that, you will get no further funding and no more power. Do you get me? And they did it. They did it within a week with our help. Each one had to spend about 3 hours just learning how to quantify their values. They didn't know how to do it, but they did it. By the way, that corporation, which had been losing money for 7 years, went into profit for the next 14 years.
Like Hewlett Packard.
Yes.
Right, with their 10x.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's it. I mean, that's what you need to do. You need to hold them to it, and you need to do that in short incremental cycles. Not a year from now, you have to show that you've given value to stakeholders. Next week or next month.
Be impatient.
With the values delivered.
Insist on results, measurable every week. Okay, every 2 weeks, but not in a year or 2 or 3. That's unnecessary. They may tell you it's necessary, but they're wrong.
They'll tell you again and again. And also from your side, stay away from the technological decisions, right? So typically don't call the project the technology. Don't call it the digital transformation project. Now you mixed in the solution. Don't say the project.
Call it the corporate values improvement project.
Yeah. The delivering 10x values to your stakeholder project, right? And another typical, like we talked about, was combining projects. Don't call the projects, where you already lay out that you're going to combine.
Call it the cost reduction project, but not the combining systems project.
Yeah. So that's what I think you need to focus on. I think you're pretty clear about that already. To the CEO in London. Good luck.
Okay, maybe we'll report in 5 years whether the corporation went bankrupt or not with our advice.
And if you get them to deliver value early and focus on that, maybe much earlier we can report on value delivered.
Good point.
Be impatient.
Yeah. I'll tell him that we have to have a podcast soon, so you better get some good results early so we can talk about it.
Maybe we could bring him into the podcast. Maybe we can go there and invite him and join the podcast in a year from now and explain how things went. Why not?
Why not?
That'd be really good, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. This is Tom Gilb.
Kai Gilb.
Kai Gilb. We do this regularly. It's a value-first focus podcast where we help you and people like you to succeed in product development. Thank you very much.